There are so many different AI image models out there to choose from when making your images, but which one is best for what you're trying to achieve? Well, today I'm going to dive in and show you the various different models within Kittl who have sponsored this video, so you can determine which model you should use when creating your next image. And the cool thing is these image models are completely free to use for the month of November, so that means you can try out a whole bunch of these models for free without a subscription by using the link in the description below. So to give you an idea of how this works, there's a bit of information here on Kittl's blog. And it starts on November 1st of 2025, so this month. Only up to 10 million generations are available for the entire Kittl community. So I highly recommend checking that out if you want to try out some of these image models. So I've got a new project here in Kittl, and of course, if I want to generate some images, I just need to head down here to the AI tab, and you'll see we get Kittl AI. So getting straight to the image models themselves, if I click here, you notice we have Ideogram 2, Seedream 4, and a bunch of other models here. However, some of these will say free for a limited time. So Google Imagen 4, and also has the render time here, which is pretty handy. Got Flux Context Pro, Seedream 4, and you can try these for free, but we'll also check out some of these other models and we can determine what their strengths are and when you should be using them. I'm going to head down and start with Nano Banana. I'm going to type up a basic prompt. And so we're starting off with some photorealism. We want to see which models perform well with photorealism, so we can touch on which models you should choose when trying to generate photographs for your designs or whatever it is you're creating. So the prompt I've come up with is a photograph of a young woman and an old man having a coffee in a cafe, because I want to see how well it handles sort of like people of different ages. Also, I've added a little bit of extra information in there, like the street is busy. There's a nice calm vibe to the cafe with earthy tones in the decor, but I want it to look professional. So we can judge the images we're creating by the details in this prompt. And I'm going to go with a 16:9 aspect ratio where possible. And we're going to generate a single image for each one and compare the latest versions of the various different models. Now, starting off with Nano Banana, one thing I noticed is no janky text. All of the objects in the background seem to be actual objects and not just weird little shapes. So I think it's actually pretty much nailed the photorealism here. And pretty much all the images that I created here follow the prompt pretty effectively, except for maybe one. But moving on to ChatGPT, we get that weird kind of yellow tint. The man's eyes look a little bit funny, and there's just a little bit of an artificialness, especially in the girl's teeth. So I would say this is more of an outdated model and probably worth skipping. But if we go to DALL-E 3, this is probably the most outdated. It was the original model that came with Kittl. And the details are just not quite there. You zoom in and you just get some weird little funny bits and pieces or uniform kind of patterns as opposed to something that looks natural. So I'd probably give DALL-E 3 the skip. But Flux 1.1 Pro, this looks pretty incredible. This looks spot on. It looks sharp. It looks photoreal. There is a bit of an issue with the girl's hand on the plate, but I would say that's probably just a small little thing that could be easily fixed. But overall, I would say this is probably my favorite model so far for creating something that looks professional, crisp, and photorealistic. And compared to the other Flux models, it's definitely the best. We go to Flux Context Pro. It doesn't look professional. Otherwise, it does look photorealistic, but it doesn't look great. And we want to have that professional photo look. And Flux Schnell, again, a little bit more outdated. We've lost some of the details. And Google Imagen 4. This also looks pretty good. So definitely a solid model. And I love the detail and the look. This has a great vibe and feel to it. And Ideogram 3. This also looks good. Not quite as good as some of my others, but I can't really fault it when it comes to things like detail, photorealism, and Seedream 4. This looks pretty good. The girl looks a little bit funny, like just slightly, but otherwise it's pretty good. I would say that there's actually another strength to Seedream, which is resolution. But little bits of detail in the glass. The fact that the glass is a little bit dirty, I think is a nice touch. My only real complaint is there's some janky text on the far right that is shown up. And just to add this in as a quick edit, you'll notice that she has a left arm and a right arm coming up towards the hand while one is also crossed in front of it. So she has 3 arms, which is also something worth considering. But otherwise, apart from those few things, it's a solid model, not as good as some of the others, but I think the resolution makes up for it, which I'm going to touch on in a minute. But to summarize, if you're looking for photorealism, I would say Flux Ultra is the best, followed by, say, Google Imagen 4 and Nano Banana if you want to get the absolute best results. But what about image resolution? Looking at all of the models, lowest to highest, we have SDXL Flash, which actually didn't do 16:9, did 1024 by 1024. Seedream 3, only 1280 by 720, and Ideogram 3. These don't get much bigger across the different ideogram models, and the same can be said for Flux Pro and Flux Schnell, but Nano Banana, about the same. But when you get to Flux Context Pro, it's now starting to come up a little bit with Google Imagen 4 stepping up. Most of these around that resolution. ChatGPT also didn't get the 16:9, but it's just a little bit higher. And the same with DALL-E 3, another step higher again. But when we get to Pro Ultra, which was my favorite, much higher resolution, but Seadream 4 definitely has the highest. So if having a high image resolution is important to you, then Flux 1.1 Pro Ultra and Seadream 4 are definitely your top choice. But I also wanted to just quickly touch on the vector image generation, as you have a vector image generation or vector image gen tools. So I wanted to just quickly come in to Kittl, because what we can do is, again, go into our image generator. Rather than picking a model, just remember you also have styles. If you're looking for a particular style, regardless of the model, choosing one of these might be the best way to get a consistent result from what you see here. These are the featured models, but you have things like photo models. So you can also, if you're wanting to use one of the models I mentioned before, come down to all models and you can actually filter by model. So if I want to use Flux 1.1 Pro Ultra, there's actually whimsical retro vibes, analog editorial. So this is another way for you to pick the correct model that's going to give you the best job for what you're trying to achieve. But coming down, going back to all models, I want to touch on the fact that we have vector. Because you have vintage drawing, Flux Context Pro, Google Imagen. I would actually recommend focusing more on the styles here when it comes to creating vectors, because most of the vector models are pretty solid. Now, I don't think these are actually generated within these models as much as generated and converted, but I've found the results to be pretty spot on and you can get some pretty good results. So when it comes to vector models, coming in, choosing from here is going to be your best bet. However, if we were to generate a full color vector image, say a logo, and convert it to a vector, then what is going to be the best choice there? So we're going to skip the styles this time and we're going to focus on the models to see which one produces the best vector art based on our prompt. And then we're going to also touch on which one's going to be the best for generating text. I'm going to move up to the newer models, starting with Seadream 4, type in a prompt. So I have a minimalist vector logo. The word minimalist is great for removing details, but I want a cat's face wearing sunglasses for a business called Cool Cat. Simple emblem style for a local cat washing business, vector art. And now keeping in mind that these are the bitmaps and we can easily convert to vector using Kittl's vectorizer, but as far as logos go, the simplicity of this one works well. It's also done a great job with the text. Now we move on to Nano Banana, and again, it's done a great job with the text. The logo is nice and simple. Not quite as stylistic, but it kind of gets the job done. And a lot of this is going to come down to personal preference, but I really like this logo the best so far as the layout. So as far as logos go, this is great, but pretty much all of these nailed the assignment when it comes to vector. All of them convert to vector pretty easily. And including Google Imagen 4, a little bit more color than I'd like, but if that's what you're after, you can see how well that seems to work. Now, this is the only one which added text and did a bad job of it, which is Flux Schnell, also one of the older models, but it does do a good job of creating a vector style image, although some of the shading in the ears would be hard to convert. But you can see here, as we go through, they all do a pretty decent job of creating a logo, although Flux Pro Ultra added 2 sets of sunglasses. But overall, I think they all do a pretty decent job. The text isn't perfect, but the emblem itself, pretty good across the board. But I would say that Flux is probably the one to avoid the most, but it still doesn't do a bad job. Overall, these are all pretty good for producing vector style emblems. But for this challenge of creating a vector logo, I would say that Ideogram 3, ChatGPT and Nano Banana, I think nailed it when it came to this particular challenge. However, all the models did pretty well. But what about text? This time, instead of actually asking for a lot, including the logo, I'm just going to ask for some text and I'm going to pop it into some kind of photo. So the prompt I'm going to use is a photo of a man holding a sign which says, AI text isn't easy. Keeping it nice and simple, quotation marks around the text. Starting again with Seadream 4, the text has been totally nailed. However, it just kind of looks like plain text. So even though it's quite accurate, it's not really my best choice. Nano Banana nails the whole hand-drawn look and is probably the best so far. Ideogram, which is known for its text, does a fantastic job. It doesn't look like it's drawn on like Nano Banana, but it's still really, really solid. The style is spot on and definitely one of my top choices. And because of that, I decided to try Ideogram 2, which also works out pretty well. However, it doesn't actually, the rest of the image is actually where it gets let down. It doesn't look quite as real, but for text, definitely seems to do a great job. Google Imagen 4, again, stylized, looks pretty good. Looks like it's actually taken a proper font. If you look at the two A's in this, they're identical. So this looks like it's almost typed in. Flux Context Pro looks, I would say, pretty solid as well. Probably not quite as interesting. Flux Pro Ultra, however, has really dropped the ball on this one. DALL-E 3 gets the text in there, but the spacing is not quite that good. And as well, the rest of the image also lets it down. ChatGPT also does the text pretty decently, actually has a little bit of texture to it, so it's actually turned out not too bad. So based on what I've seen, I would say that Nano Banana, the Ideogram models, and Google Imagen 4 seem to be the best models when it comes to using text. But just remember, as you're using Kittl, if you want to sort of get a bit of an idea as to what the model is built for, what it's good for, then there's a little description underneath each model. And again, the render time. So most of these are pretty quick. Seadream taking 40 seconds, a bit longer. And ChatGPT, 60 seconds. You can see that there are styles associated with it and the credits that you will spend to generate an image. So it's good to have that information on hand when choosing a model. But on top of that, before we get into styles, we're going to look at image editing and which AI model is best for that. And so I have this image here. What we're going to do is ask to remove the glasses and pop this guy on a beach just to see how well it handles it. And the first way we can edit images is to come here to AI chat. And of course we can upload an image, but if our image is already on the canvas, then I can click on this and come up to AI chat. And it will pop the image in here. So I can say something like, remove the man's glasses and change the background to a beach. So something nice and simple. And I'm going to copy that prompt because this chat section here uses ChatGPT to make the image edits. So I send, and then we get this image here, which looks pretty decent. But if you look a bit closely at some of the details, you can see the Adidas has been removed from his shirt, and just some of the facial hair and a little bits and pieces of his face are slightly different. If you knew this person personally, you would say the person on the right looks a lot like him, but isn't the same person. So it's still done a pretty good job with the whole image. It does have that yellow tint more applied to his skin a bit, but I would say it's a decent enough AI image editor for making basic edits if you don't need the person to be identical. And I'm going to check consistency in a little while so you can see what I mean. But coming across, if we need to edit images in Kittl, we also have what's called flows. So I click on my artboard and I click Add Smartboard. And where it says up here, the model, we can choose ChatGPT, Nano Banana, ChatGPT 1, or Seadream. Now we've already tried ChatGPT, so we're going to try Nano Banana and Seadream by using flows and an identical prompt. Remove the man's glasses and change the background to a beach. Starting with Nano Banana, I hit generate, but on top of that, I'm going to come back, click on this artboard, add another smartboard, which has appeared below. I will simply move it beneath here. I'm going to add the same prompt. This time, change to Seadream 4. I hit generate, and I've popped the images side by side, so we can see Seadream on the left, Nano Banana on the right. Both of them very convincing. As a matter of fact, Seadream seems to have kept more of the imperfections of the man's face on the left, but Nano Banana seems to have smoothed out some of it. However, both look pretty good. Nano Banana is more accurate when it comes to the shirt. However, I do think Seadream has had a better job of copying some of the facial hair. So this really comes down to personal preference. I would say either one of these is a great image editor and definitely superior to ChatGPT when it comes to making those changes in the consistency. However, Nano Banana's beach is a little bit more interesting, but I feel like the lighting in Seadream is a little bit better. So this really comes down to personal preference. But what about the consistency? I'm going to come back to this original artboard and I'm going to duplicate it, because one of the tests I use to judge consistency is to add a smartboard, and the prompt I'm going to describe will be copy this image exactly and make no alterations. And now Seadream 4 has duplicated this image. However, if I copy this prompt and I repeat this process until we get 5 iterations, and from that we can compare the first image to the last image to highlight any changes. But before we do an up-close comparison, I'm actually going to duplicate these to try Nano Banana and ChatGPT. And comparing the first to the last, we're starting off with Seadream. Now, this guy looks like he's a little bit of a burn victim on the right over here. His skin is all blotchy. It's actually taken it pretty far. However, this was the highest resolution editing model out there. So if you can get away with what consistency you need, this may be the best for high resolution editing, but it still has changed a fair amount. Nano Banana happens to be the closest, but it's also made things quite fuzzy. So it's like it's lost a resolution and blurred up a little bit, but this is the closest model when it comes to consistency. Whereas ChatGPT just kind of fails on all accounts. It takes a guy who is partially blonde, gives him brown hair, adds that dreaded yellow tint, but I am surprised it picked up on the Adidas symbol on his shirt. It just changed the color of it to black. So it's impressive in a lot of ways, but consistency is not one of them. So my conclusion would be simply that Nano Banana is still going to be the best model for consistency, but if you need higher resolution, Seedream is going to be the best. However, you will lose consistency if you continue to make edits in an iterative fashion. What about different image styles? Which model seems to handle styles the best? And this can be a very tough, broad one to explore, but we're going to start off by trying something with a little bit of an anime style using a prompt like this and move on from there. Now for our anime style images, I've started off with ChatGPT, and this looks pretty decent. It doesn't look quite as anime-like as I want to. It still has that yellow tinge, but it's not too bad. Move on to Flux Ultra, and it doesn't quite get the anime style. It does have a bit of an anime feel to it, but the outlines and everything, it's a very cool image, but still not quite what I was after. We move on to Context Pro, and this has done a pretty decent job. And all of the models did actually do a decent job at capturing the anime style to some degree. Most of them are a little bit better than others. Nano Banana actually added the YouTube play bar for some reason, but also does a pretty decent job. I find Seedream 4, I think in this instance, is probably the best one. It looks the most dynamic and has an anime feel to it, like an expensive anime film. So I then tried a 3D style, and this one is someone walking away from an explosion. ChatGPT was the only model that actually rendered the guy walking away from the explosion, but it produced the most boring image. And on top of that, DALL-E 3 looks pretty decent, but if you move down, Flux Pro Ultra, not quite as good, and Flux Context Pro, again, the explosion looks a little bit funny. Once we get into Imagen 4 though, things start to look a little bit more impressive. Ideogram 3 looks decent, but not quite as good as Imagen 4. Whilst Nano Banana looks pretty great, the rips in the cape, the smashed windows. This is my favorite image of this lineup, followed closely by Seedream 4. The lighting and everything looks very dramatic and looks pretty cool when it comes to this particular style. Moving on now to a Renaissance style, again starting with ChatGPT. This is definitely the least impressive of them all. And DALL-E 3 looks a little bit soft and just a little bit out of date. We get to Flux Pro Ultra, and this image starts to look pretty crisp. Starts to look more like a bit like a Caravaggio style painting with very high contrast. Flux Context Pro, a little bit fuzzy. It's realistic, but doesn't look great. Whilst Imagen 4 again does a great job. We move on to Ideogram 3, and it's not bad, not quite as good as Imagen. And Nano Banana doing a pretty decent job as well. But again, Seedream 4 totally nails the assignment. Even looks like it's actually painted, whereas some of these kind of look like photos with a painting style applied to them. So far, Seedream 4 seems to be the winner when it comes to restyling images, at least with the styles I've tried. Moving on, I then tried Memphis graphic design style, and as a bit of a last ditch to try and get something different, and ChatGPT did an okay job. DALL-E 3's is a little bit boring, but Flux definitely elevated it a little bit. It's not quite fantastic, but pretty good. Flux Context Pro looks a little bit fuzzy and doesn't quite capture it as well. But Google Imagen 4, again, just does something a bit more interesting. It looks a little bit better. And of course, Ideogram 3, this time absolutely nails the assignment, and Nano Banana also does a pretty decent job. But finally, Seedream 4, again, knocks it out of the park and does absolutely the best job. So at the end of the day, I could try a bunch more styles, and I do think it's probably better to go in and try certain styles out for yourself in the styles panel if you really want to try and get a certain style. But ultimately, Seedream 4 seems to produce the best images out of Kittl's image models when it comes to restyling and creating different styles of images. I would say Google Imagen 4 is the next best thing. And then it's kind of a bit of a toss-up. Nano Banana, sometimes Flux Ultra. But other than that, the rest of them don't seem to compete with these 4 models. But let's recap. For photorealism, you want to stick with Flux 1.1 Pro Ultra. Google Imagen 4, or Nano Banana if you're trying to get the most photorealistic image out there. But for the highest resolution images, Seadream 4 is by far the most highest resolution image model, followed by Flux 1.1 Pro Ultra. But if you want to create vector logos or graphics, then Ideogram 3, Nano Banana, and ChatGPT seem to be the best for producing that style of graphic, and then of course you can vectorize them using Kittl's vectorizer. But if you need to include text, then you're looking at Nano Banana, the Ideogram models, and Google Imagen 4 for the best text based off our tests. And for editing, I would say you're probably better off using Kittl Flows with the models of either Nano Banana or Seadream to get the best edits, with Nano Banana being the most consistent, Seadream being the highest resolution. Before the restyling tests I made, we had Seadream, Google Imagen 4, and then of course Nano Banana and sometimes Flux Pro 1.1 Ultra did the best job in that order. And I would say that you can see quite clearly how Seadream and Nano Banana are pretty strong models overall. Google Imagen 4 is another strong model, and then the rest kind of fall into place from there. So that should give you a bit of an idea of what you should try first. But again, it really depends on what you're trying to create. If you have a certain style of image or something you're trying to create, even the so-called best models might not nail the job. So I highly recommend what you do is go check out Kittl during the month of November, just after this video is released, so you can try out a bunch of these models for free. There's some information linked to in the description below. And if you want to go in there, you can try those out, check out the different styles, and see what you think for yourself. So once again, that is the video for today, guys. And again, I hope you go and check out Kittl. There's a link in the description. Otherwise, thanks for watching the video. Hope to see you again soon, and have a great day.